Welcome to the Adulting Demystified podcast with your host, Odelia Goldberg. In each episode, we'll have subject matter experts discuss things that most people don't know, but probably should. You can find this show on all the major platforms, including YouTube, LinkedIn, Facebook, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and on our website, ogoldberglaw.com. Now, here's the host of Adulting Demystified, Odelia Goldberg.
Welcome everyone to another episode of Adulting Demystified. Today we have with us the one, the only Marc, and he is an accountant. And Marc is a person that I go to with questions that I have, and Marc is a person that I send referrals to, and Marc is also an amazing drummer. So Marc, thank you so much for joining our podcast today. And just to recap, what we're here to do is to talk about things that people get wrong. What I do, estate planning, I constantly have to tell people that a will doesn't avoid probate, that a trust needs to be funded, that beneficiaries need to be added on bank accounts. So these are things that people commonly have misconceptions about. So I thought maybe all the other subject matter areas also have these common misconceptions. And wouldn't it be great if we were able to get on and kind of demystify some of this stuff? So again, thank you for joining us.
Well, thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
So Marc, I want to give you the floor. Why don't you tell us a little bit about what you do?
Sure. So my role is a certified public accountant, or CPA. What my firm does, it's actually a pretty diversified practice. So we have some areas of specialty that we have focused on over the years, but I will tell you the majority of my practice is really geared towards service clients, service businesses, as well as individuals. And we do trust returns, we do individual returns, we do partnership returns, we do S corporation tax returns. But in addition to just taxes, we're not just a tax practice. We have a pretty deep well of experience, particularly, for example, in the healthcare space. I actually started my career in a home health agency way back in the late 80s. And it was from that experience that I really was able to get a really good understanding of operations, cost finding, analytics, all the things that make a company tick, and really understand on a granular level just what data means, what the information is telling us, and how we can use that for planning or for interpretation or for whatever's next for us. So we're not just, we're probably known as just, tax preparers and putting little numbers in little boxes all day, but there's a greater value that CPAs bring to the table, particularly when they've had years of experience in working with many different types of clients, whether they're individuals or businesses. Largely in the business environment, businesses go through different life cycles. So we will start sometimes at the infancy stage where they're just getting organized, and you have to have discussions about not just tax planning, but what type of entity should it be? How does it affect them this way? How does it affect them that way? What if they're contemplating selling the company? What does that look like? What are the areas of vulnerability when you are merging, or if you're being acquired, or if you're buying a company or selling your company? It's all of those years of experience of doing different types of work, whether it's financial reporting, whether it's analytics, whether it's due diligence, even sometimes in litigation support. All those things come together to really add value to what a CPA provides for their clients. Does that help you?
Yeah, absolutely. And when clients come to me and they don't have a CPA that is strong in that department, it definitely has a void. We do kind of feel that in the estate planning process because, a lot of what I do is really dependent upon the type of structure that they currently have, how many members are in the LLC, who are the shareholders of the corporation. And, then my job is to avoid probate. And mostly what I do is I assign interests. So those individuals aren't holding their interest individually, but they're holding it through a trust, right? Because an LLC and a corporation, those entities don't avoid probate. So when somebody has an LLC, that interest in that LLC, whether it's 100% or 50%, once they pass away, has to go through the probate process unless they hold that interest through their grantor revocable trust. So the trust, a lot of times what we do is we establish these trusts that act as the members or the shareholders of an entity versus someone individually. So, I work really closely with a lot of accountants, CPAs, and when we don't have someone strong on the team, I feel the void for sure. So, yeah, definitely.
Absolutely. We encounter, it's interesting when we talk to potential clients. The question often comes down to, what they think they need versus what they really need.
Sure.
And oftentimes I'll tell them if a potential client is looking for someone just to pencil in a tax return, you probably don't need to go to a CPA for that. A tax return can be filled out by anyone who's got experience with it. If they're looking for advice, suggestions, get their questions answered, understand what is defined as income, understand the mechanics of everything and how this impacts them, not just tax-wise, but certainly for your estate planning, that's when you need to approach somebody who's got experience.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So what are some common misconceptions that you find some of your clients have that you feel is, if you could shout from the rooftops, guys, do this, what would that be?
Well, it's a great question. And I think the answer to that would probably lie in first, who the particular client is. Like, are we talking about individuals? Are we talking about organizations? So if I start at the organizational level, I think the most important thing for any client who's a business owner, no matter what they do for a living, if they're an attorney, if they're a physician, if they're trades, whatever it is, I remind them that they are not just who they are by profession. They are also a business owner. And they often forget that. And the reason that's important is because there are certain tenets of responsibility they have when they own businesses.
Sure.
We made a compact with the US government that if we earn income, we're going to report it and possibly pay taxes on it. But the biggest thing I feel that is important for them, and I'm not sure this is answering your question, but I feel what is important is that they have a sense of organization, that they are organized, that they know how to put their hands on certain information, data, documents, whatever that might be, because all of that goes into making decisions, right? Or having information that might actually change their behavior. So I would start at the top with, let's figure out what it takes for you to be organized. What information we need to have to be, because that is really the top of everything for me. If you're not organized, we're not going to have any intel to make decisions with. And in the end, what I tell people about any kind of financial reporting, a financial statement, a balance sheet, an income statement, a tax return, all of this is data. And what are financial statements really designed to do? They're designed to give you information to help you make a decision or to change your behavior, whatever that is.
Right.
But in order to do that, you have to start at the first, the beginning of the process.
Yeah.
So what are some misconceptions? Well, I would say one of the biggest misconceptions is that we just put little numbers in little boxes and all we do are tax returns. It's kind of like saying all your pediatrician does is address coughs and colds. You and I both know that that's not true, right? So what a lot of people don't understand about CPAs is that what we're really interested in and where the value is our ability to help them plan, is to help them understand what are the components of their income, what are the moving pieces that work either in their favor or not in their favor, or where you have to get involved or an attorney has to get involved for something else. Maybe there's litigation, maybe there's putting together a partnership, putting together an operating agreement. All of those things the CPA does get involved with, because there's going to be questions about allocation of percentages. There's going to be questions about how do we determine a buy-in, how do we determine a buyout. So going back to your question, I think one of the misconceptions is that all we do are just fill out tax returns. That is absolutely not all that we do, or at least not all that I do.
Sure. I think there's one aspect of the tax return, which is critical and kind of important, but then there's also the planning portion that comes and the prevention that comes, right? Because if you meet early enough in the year, you're able to kind of identify pain points and pressures that later on, that if you don't do that planning and that conversation, really could impact, not just from a tax perspective, but from a business perspective. So definitely the planning and the talking and the understanding. But I really like your point about organization, because it got me thinking, do you mean mental organization or do you mean a paper organization? Because sometimes those are two separate things, just getting people organized in their thoughts as to what it is what entity they have, or
I agree with you. And I think both are valid. I think both are important, because when you become the business owner, like I said, you have certain tenets of responsibility. At least in your head, you should know what those are. What are my deadlines? What are my organizational filings I have to have done? I serve a lot of clients in Medicare home health, for example. One of the things they need to know is they have an annual compliance report that has to be filed. You can't expect, I'm not going to be the one to remind you. This is your business. You should know that.
Right.
Okay, I can take care of the mechanics of it and get it done, but that is your business.
Right.
So if you're in a business that has certain regulations, you need to know what those are. The accountant's
Sure.
not going to know all that. So yes, going back to your point, I agree 100%. Organization starts with a mindset to allow them to also physically organize their data, their information, because we're going to ask questions, the attorney's going to ask questions, the accountants are going to ask questions, and someone needs to know how to access the information so we can get those answers. And I will tell you, in almost 35 years of doing this, if they're not organized, nothing is happening. So that is where I often start with them. And it doesn't have to be anything, huge or dramatic. It just has to be emphasized that whatever it takes to make it easier for you to access the information, I'm good with it. It can be something as simple as writing it down on a piece of paper, doing it on Excel, getting financial statements, putting it together in QuickBooks. I don't have a strong feeling for that. What I do have a feeling for is if we don't access the information, I can't help you. We don't have the opportunity to plan. I can't figure out where you're vulnerable on a tax return, for example, without that data.
Sure, absolutely. I feel your pain.
I would welcome you to my world, but I'm certain it's consistent in your world as well.
As a person that relies on other people to give me information so that I could put together information for them, definitely getting that and making sure it's spelled correctly, and
Right.
identify your children.
Look, we're a partner with our clients on that. I often tell, look, if it's the first time we're doing a tax return for you, I expect them to review the tax. We're human beings. Make sure I spelled your name correctly. Make sure my firm put the tax ID number correctly. Make sure the address is right. This is a partnership. We're all culpable in this, but we're all responsible for it. These are, what the misconception, often, just to go back to that point, is that it is not their tax return. It's the tax return that I did or my firm did. And that is not true. It is still their tax return. They have ultimate responsibility.
You mean I'm responsible for my own taxes?
I know. Go figure. Who knew? Oh, I mean, we all knew. But it is, it's interesting where, and this is part of your adulting theme, where we take responsibility, right? Where we accept responsibility and accountability for our stuff.
Yeah.
And that, myself included. I mean, I'm just there with everybody else, but we as people, whether we're in business or not, it doesn't really matter, but we have to accept responsibility for our stuff. And, you as a receiver of a product that I'm delivering to you also have a responsibility for that, to check to make sure that I've interpreted information the way that you intended it. We're still, if we're not consistent with that, we might have a different outcome. Mm-hmm. And clients, sometimes they resent that. And I tell them it's really the only way this is going to work.
I go through the same thing because I prepare like a beautiful estate plan, a trust, a will, whatever.
Sure.
I email it to the clients and I specifically say, please check names and addresses, right?
Right.
And then we have an opportunity to come into the office. And the first thing I say when I put down the will is make sure we spelled everyone's name correctly. Power of attorney, make sure we spelled everyone's name correctly. And afterwards we execute. And almost everyone goes home and rereads the documents. It's just something you do. You walk home and you're like, what did I do here? You open it up.
Absolutely.
And then there's a tiny percentage of people that are like, oh, there's an error in here, and I'm like, well, we had so many opportunities to
Right,
review
right,
it. You gave me
right.
the information. I, uploaded it.
We
So
tried. We
I hear
tried.
you. I definitely hear you. And another point that you made is that I do consider myself as a business owner, and the business that I'm in is law, right? So
Right.
first and foremost, I'm a business person, and I spend a portion of my day, honestly, businessing,
Yep.
there's
Yes, you do.
less than half of my days actually on the legal stuff, because so much
Right.
of it is about running the business,
Operating the business. Correct.
ordering paper, payroll,
Yeah.
whatever else is
Yeah.
going on here. So I hear what you're saying, in that you have to have your business hat on at all times, because otherwise the business gets away from you and you're just a lawyer without a valid
It's
business.
true. And I'll even come clean on that. I think it was maybe sometime in 2017, I think, and I've been practicing for a long time, and it was then that I realized, for all those years I've been practicing or running my business like an accountant versus running my accounting practice as a business owner. And that occurred to me when I made this very specific hire in my office, and I kept thinking to myself before I hired this gentleman, the CPA, very, very intelligent, very bright, really was a perfect fit. But I kept saying, I can't afford to hire him. I can't afford to hire him. And then for some reason, for a moment, I flipped that around. I said, you know what? I can't afford not to hire him. That was the moment that I realized I've been thinking about this, let's just use the word wrong. And I came back to understanding that you make an investment in these things in your office or in your professional world or whatever it is. And if you do this right and you're thoughtful about it, you can build around that.
Yeah.
Which is exactly what happened.
Yeah. Yeah.
To my chagrin, but yes.
I know, we both commiserate about being victims of our own success in that way, but absolutely.
Yes.
Mhm.
And I'm grateful. I believe me, I express gratitude every day for the good fortune of being able to serve people and to have a team that supports me and supports the firm in ways that I just cannot buy that level of good fortune. I have an amazing support team that the firm, the practice wouldn't be if they didn't exist the way that they do.
Of course, wouldn't have it any other way.
Correct.
Amazing. So are there any other kind of pain points or things that you would want to tell the humans about what you do, in terms of, guys, wouldn't it be just great if you did this, this one thing could really save you a lot, or,
I think the answer to that is really all about communication. And I do put it on my clients and said, look, when my office delivers, let's say, a financial statement for you, that should be your trigger to reach out to me, to call my office, make an appointment, and let's just have a conversation, whether it's 15 minutes, half hour, 10 minutes, it doesn't matter. But let's look at the statements together so that, again, we're going back to interpretation. I may look at it for different reasons than they will, and we should. We should have different perspectives on there. I'm not only just looking at it for taxes, but that's certainly, a strong area. So the point of all that is to say that I would suggest that they just have more regular communication when a certain event happens. Oh, they're thinking about buying a company, thinking about selling a company. They're considering, acquiring certain assets in their company, or they're having this situation with their revenues, whatever it is. That's a good time to reach out to their accountant and say, let's just have a conversation about what's happening. Maybe there's something impactful. Maybe there isn't. We don't know until we talk about it. And if there isn't, that's a valid response also.
Right.
Oops.
You and I kind of do similar things. You do it with numbers, I do it with words. And I find that sometimes people have a mental block when it comes to numbers, right? Like, I could imagine you have a little bit of an uphill battle in trying to convey the messages that you have to convey than I do. Because, I've got words, and words are less triggering. Maybe it's just me. Maybe maybe because I'm such a words person and I hate numbers so much that I'm projecting on everyone else. But do you find that it's more challenging? Because I see it sometimes in people's eyes when they have a block. It doesn't happen
All right.
often, but sometimes people are just turned off. They are just not going to take in this information, no matter what I do.
I have seen that, and so here's my response to that. I start at the top and I say, let's not let the numbers get in the way of the story. Look, nobody can advocate their business better than they can. They know what's going on in their business. But when we do have a conversation about it, we don't make it about the numbers. I want to hear what the story is, and I want to see if the numbers support the story.
Gotcha.
So if the numbers support the story, we use that as a springboard to launch into a different segment of the conversation. If it doesn't support the story, then either the story is incorrect or the information I have is incorrect, but both can't be true.
Right.
So I've spent many years refining a communication style that I match towards the recipient. I don't expect that everyone that I work with knows what I know, because if they did, they don't need me.
Sure.
So I understand that about people. And so my conversation or my dialogue is designed to reach them in a place where they are comfortable, and so that we can have a meaningful conversation without them feeling like the conversation. The final statement that I'll say to anybody that I'm meeting with in my office after they've had a consult with me is say, I don't want you walking out of here more confused than when you walked in.
Right.
So I give them a safe space to ask questions. I give them my interpretation of things. I give them an opportunity to let's tell their story, but I want to know how the numbers support that and what can we do with that. And that's when I step in. And numbers I kind of use as a theoretical component of where we are. What I'm trying to do is get them to understand what the results are because of an action that they took or hadn't taken yet, not because this is what the numbers will tell us at the end. Does that make sense?
That's refreshing. Yeah. That's nice. So what would be your ideal client, right? If you could kind of put together the clients that you feel would make the most sense for your firm, who would that look like?
Thank you. That's an excellent question. And we've been thoughtful about that over the last 24, 36 months, because we've changed our dynamic a little bit about who we want to work with, essentially. And ideally for us, it is a client that has an entity that requires some flow through tax planning, that requires some operational review of the financial information, that needs our help in whether it's budgeting or understanding cash flows or understanding some of the analytics or some of the drivers of their business. Because we act not just as accountants, but because we've been involved in so many different businesses. So we're advisors, we're business advisors as well. I've been doing this for many, many, many years, and I haven't seen everything, but I've seen a lot. So ideally the client would be someone who respects value, who understands what we as a firm bring to the table, who is willing to understand that value is our experience. Whether an action on our part takes 5 minutes or 5 hours doesn't really dictate the value of that.
Sure.
We're leading up to all the years of experience to get to that part. So in our firm, like I said, we work mostly with service companies, law firms, physician practices, home care agencies, financial managers, real estate, not widgets and inventory items and things like that, no construction, but really service companies. And we've pretty much honed in on that over the last 20, 25 years because I feel it has a special overview of just kind of how their operations work. I have a very good feel for it just for the years of experience of doing it. I understand what the cost finding needs to be. I understand a little bit more about allocating overhead, what the direct cost of revenue is. And I'm able to work with clients so that they understand how that impacts them because we've been doing it for years. The taxes are the taxes, whether they're a partnership or an S Corp. I explain to them what the moving parts are in ways that I hope that they can understand. And I give them the space to either understand that or to ask me questions about it. But so ideally, it's anyone with an entity or flow through entity that has some planning components to it, using their financial reporting, using their data as a way to help them make decisions.
Is there some compliance reason that you can't call yourself an advisor or a consultant? Is that something that's is it frowned upon?
No, I can. and I may do that informally, but the fact is I like to leverage my CPA license for all that. I worked very hard for it. It's, 30 years ago, it was what allowed me to do this variety of work. People just said, oh, you're a CPA, I need you to do this, this, and this. And that really gave me a ton of experience in areas that, with or without a mentor, we figured out as we went along. We got better at it as we moved along. I've always been a proponent of leveraging where I think the value is. The value is being the CPA. The value is having had that license gave me opportunities that I never would have had I not had that license. So that is a personal thing for me. Mm-hmm. And so I choose to leverage that. I think it's kind of accepted with the clients that I work with. They come to me for advice. They come to me for consulting. They pay for it. So I think it's understood that that's a part of it. And again, when I look at my branding, I don't use the CPA designation as a way to brand myself as just a tax preparer, even though my firm evolved into that. When I first went out on my own in my own practice, I didn't do any tax work. I was doing all consulting work. I was doing everything in healthcare, compliance reporting, mergers and acquisitions, due diligence, everything but taxes. And then suddenly when these clients that I was doing work for, they said, you're a CPA, here, I need you to do this. I need you to do this tax return, this financial statement, this report, whatever it is. And so suddenly it just through that evolved into a very diverse practice.
Amazing. Well, I love that, Mark. I'm your biggest fan.
Oh, you're so good. You're so good to me. You are so good to me, as I'm a huge fan of yours as well, and you know that.
I love that. Well, I want to give you an opportunity to say any final thoughts. I think you kind of, my idea of a good speaker is someone that inspires you to have a thought that you never had before. So I wanted to give you, and obviously I've had plenty of new thoughts in my head. So I wanted to give you an opportunity I think we lost your video. Are you still there? Can you see us? Maybe we lost Mark.
There he is. Okay.
Oh, there you are. Yay.
So sorry about that.
No worries. So I wanted to give you an opportunity. Is there any final thoughts you wanted to say to the humans?
Sure. Yes. Make the investment in your professional, whoever that professional is. Make a determination of what's important for you when you work with that professional, and check with many different professionals. It's not one size fits all, but be willing to make the investment in it. You will get a return on that investment, but professional services that come with those years of experience and those accreditations and those licenses are very valuable. And you should avail yourself of that and understand that it's not a cost to you. It's an investment that you are making in your organization or for yourself.
I agree wholeheartedly. Mark, how could people find you if they want more information or to reach out?
Thank you. So they're welcome to call my office if they have questions. My office number is 754-301-2183. I would encourage them to, if they do call my office, is to let my office staff know that you heard me on your podcast, because that's how they'll be able to get through to me. If they have questions, or they want to run something by me, I'm happy to be a resource for your listeners, for your viewers, for the community. You and I have talked about this for years, how we both feel it's very important. This is how we give back to our community, by being available as a resource, being available to answer questions, to see what we can do to support our members in the community. So I'm happy to do that for your listeners and for your community. Just call my office. If they want to run something by me, they're welcome to.
I appreciate you, Mark. Thank you so much again for taking a chance on me. And thank you again. I can't say how much I enjoy you.
Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it. It's great to see you, and reach out anytime.
Yay.
Take care.
You've been tuning in to the Adulting Demystified podcast with your host, Odelia Goldberg. You should never get legal advice from a podcast. Please don't do anything stupid and ruin it for the rest of us. You deserve to have your own legal advice from a legal professional. You can find this show on all the major platforms, including YouTube, LinkedIn, Facebook, Apple Podcast, Spotify, and on our website, oldgoldberglaw.com. Thank you for your positive reviews, comments, questions, and for sharing this show with others.